Hi everyone, it's just about 9:30, so I thought I'd hop on here and just get everything ready to go. Once it's 9:30 officially, oh there it is, 9:30. Okay, great. So this is a new stream time for AP Biology. We thought we would try it out to try to hit some of our West Coast friends because the 3-hour time difference from Eastern is a big deal. So I'm glad that you've joined us. My name is Kari Parnin, and we're going to start with just a simple intro to Unit 2, focusing on subcellular components, which are basically just the organelles, and just kind of really wrapping our heads around why we're learning this. Rather than just looking at it from a viewpoint of memorizing what structure does which function, we're really just going to look at it from a unique point of view, and I think that will help you in the long run understand it. So for those of you who are here already, go ahead and in the chat tell us where you're coming in from, because then that will also help me see if I'm really hitting some West Coast people or if my East Coasters and Midwesterners are just staying up late. So go ahead and just type in and say where you're coming from tonight. New York. Okay, so it's late for you too. The Bear Flag State. Awesome. So New York, it's late for you, I know. It's 9:30 my time in Michigan, so it's definitely almost bedtime for me. So for those of you who are here, hi Sandra, good to see you again. Coming in from Virginia. 9:30 for you too, yep, that's right, it's late. So this won't always be the new time. I just thought I would try it out to see how it goes. So welcome, we've got some new people. Go ahead and just say hello to everyone. Let us know where you're streaming in from, so I have an idea if this time is suitable, if 9:30 is too late or too early. We want to try to find a good stream time that works for everybody. Of course, you can always rewatch these later too. So if there's something you missed and you're a 5able Plus member, then you can absolutely rewatch these streams. So for those of you who are just joining, we're all just typing in the chat over here on the right where we're streaming in from. So I am here in Michigan. It's 9:30 my time. Some of you it's 9:30. Some of you it might be earlier. California. Okay, good. So we've got someone from California. That's good. I was hoping to do this live stream late so that people from California can. Oh, we got some 2 Florida people. Hi, guys. Welcome back. I'm recognizing some of you from previous streams, so I'm glad that you could. Oh, we've got more East Coast than West Coast tonight. How funny. You guys stay up so late. That's amazing. All right, well, welcome everyone. Hi, Izzy. Hi, Zion. Ami-san, is that how you say your name? Hopefully I'm saying it right. Ami-san, maybe? Let me know if I'm saying it wrong. It's fine. Oh, I'm so sorry. My first name is really hard to pronounce as well. People see Kari instead of Kari, but yeah, so that's why I try to say people's names right. But anyways, as always, I like to just make sure I show you to follow Think 5able, and also follow me on Twitter because I usually post when I'll be streaming. And if you follow me, then you'll have an idea. And I'm trying to become more active on Twitter just because I'm not normally really active on Twitter. So this is new to me too. Anyway, so if you didn't do that, go ahead and follow Think 5able, because then you get all the updates and reminders, and you're probably in other AP classes too, other than AP Biology. Maybe you're not, but if you are, check out the other streams too. They've been really helpful for a lot of students. Okay, today will be kind of short because we're just looking at organelles, and honestly, we shouldn't talk about organelles for over an hour. So we'll keep it nice and short. Coming soon, our other streamer, I believe she's streaming tomorrow night on cell structure and function. Then I'll be coming in Sunday night for cell size. And then after that, we'll do plasma membranes and membrane permeability. So those are our next 4 streams coming at you. Those are really nice foundations. If we can understand all that stuff really well, including tonight, if you can understand all that, then everything else later on in terms of cell energetics, like photosynthesis and cellular respiration, will be shared. So someone's asking if I could send the link to the PowerPoint. So I don't post that now until the video's uploaded to Fiveable. So once it's all done, then I will absolutely upload that. And I'll upload any other worksheets if we ever go over worksheets too. Okay, so just looking ahead, Unit 2, thanks. Unit 2, these are all the things of Unit 2. So again, our Unit 2 is based off of the College Board's Unit 2. So your teacher's Unit 2 might be different. You might be in evolution right now. I know some of you had said earlier in the week that you're in evolution. Some of you are in cellular respiration already. Oh, so someone's asking how long does it take to put up the streams for replays? It is there within 24 hours. I usually try to get it up the next morning. But yeah, 24 hours maximum amount of time is how long it'll take for you to wait. Okay, so here are major topics. We're looking at cells, obviously, membranes, compartmentalization, osmosis, if you've done that already, or diffusion. Those will be really good streams to look at and to tune into. All right, these are the organelles we're going to focus on today. We're going to focus on the ones in bold: ribosomes, endoplasmic reticulum, Golgi, mitochondria, lysosomes, vacuoles, and chloroplasts. There's obviously a lot more than that, but as far as AP College Board is concerned, the reason we try to know organelles is because we want to figure out, well, how is this big important organ, or this organelle important for big picture stuff? Okay. All right. So a couple of things when we talk about, I didn't want to just jump into organelles right away. I wanted to kind of remind you of what does it mean to be alive? What do all living things have in common? So your teacher might have talked about this on day one, right? And maybe you've even written a paper about it or something, or an essay. I like to use this acronym called REACH and GO. And again, this isn't like, from a textbook. This is just something that I came up with a long time ago in terms of things that all, characteristics that all living things have. So I really like it because I think you can make sure you can go into each of these details, and cells fit very nicely into it. So reproduce, if all living things have to reproduce at some point. All living things need and use energy. All living things have played a role in some sort of evolution. They've got an adaptation. All living things are connected in terms of the evolutionary tree. All living things have cells, right? If you don't have a cell, you're not a living thing. Oh, you guys are in the same class. Hi, Shreya and Izzy. Sorry, high school bio teacher. I can't. Oh dear. Well, I'm glad that you're both here. Yeah, spread the word. Looks like we have two people who are in the same class. So spread the word. Yeah, tell your friends in class about Fiveable. I think that would be extremely helpful, for sure. So nucleic acids is also something they have in common: growth and organization. So I just wanted to show you that acronym to think about, to kind of help ground us in why are we looking at cells over the next couple streams, and why it's so important. If you think about it, we're in biology right now, right? So the study of life, study of living things. So if we don't really know what it means to be alive, or what do all living things have in common, then what are we doing here? So just make sure you ground yourself in that and think about, okay, well, cells are something that all living things have. Let's try to figure out how they work and do their jobs. All right, so obviously cells is the one we're going to be focusing on. But the other ones like growth, organization, nucleic acids, homeostasis, energy, all of that is grounded in the fact that this is happening in cells. Same thing with reproduction. Okay, you might have also gone over this, and I thought it'd be a good review. The levels of organization in terms of, we look at living things and we kind of go from small to big. So obviously if we were to start big with a full functioning organism like that mouse, okay, what's the next smallest level of organization? We would say is the organ system. And then within that, the organ, within the organ, the tissue, and then the cell. And so try to continually think about this. And when we're looking at like images of cells today, try to remember that, in multicellular organisms, these cells are a part of a bigger picture, right? They are part of some living thing, whether that's a huge tree or a teeny tiny insect or, grass in your yard, something like that, right? So all these cells are a part of something bigger. And if we understand the tiny inner workings, we're going to understand the bigger picture stuff as well. All right, so the cell is obviously the smallest component listed here, but let's just take a stab at this. What would the next smallest component be? So if we were to break down a cell even more, what would the next smallest component be? Go ahead and type in your answer, A, B, C, D. A, atom, B, molecule, C, organelle, D, organ system. Okay, a lot of you are saying B, molecule. I would say there's one other. There you go. Some of you are changing your mind. So think next smallest. Molecules are definitely smaller than a cell, but think molecules are almost too small. There's something in between molecule and cell that I would classify as a smaller component. Good. A lot of you are changing your minds to C. Absolutely. It's actually C, organelle. That's right. There you go. There you go. So, right, it's organelle. And so it helps if you maybe think smallest to biggest, right? Atom would be like the tiniest, then molecule, right? Atoms form molecules, and then a bunch of molecules can form organelles. And then organelles are found within the larger working system of a cell, and so on and so forth. So that's why our main focus today is going to be organelles, because if we want to understand a cell, we got to know who's doing what inside that cell. What they're made of, how do they play a role, are they making macromolecules, are they using them, and how they're helping this thing survive. Okay, oops, sorry. So we think about more organization of living things. I just showed you the organization of in terms of like the hierarchy of size. The other way in biology we like to organize all the living things is just like how you would organize a family tree. If you've ever heard about the buzz going on with like Ancestry.com and 23andMe and all those other Ancestry and DNA companies that are helping people figure out where their placement is in terms of humans, other humans, and comparing yourself and being able to say like, oh, look, you came from this area and you're, this percent of, you're this percent Italian and this percent whatever. We do the same thing. Scientists like to do the same thing with all the living things. And so I just drew this evolutionary tree here to represent that we've got at the very bottom here would represent your ancestor. So where all these three things are linked is a common ancestor that all things can be rooted in. And the reason we root them together is that they share three really important things. They all share that they have ribosomes. Ribosomes is a very important organelle that we'll get to in a second. They all have some sort of nucleic acid. And they all have an outer membrane, or at least a cell that encapsulates them, right? There's not just like these, every living thing, even if it's a bacteria, something really small, one unicellular, it has a membrane that separates itself from the outer world. So those three commonality things, along with a whole host of other pieces of data, is how scientists have come up with this basic tree of life. It's actually 3 domains. Long ago, it used to just be bacteria and bacteria and eukarya, and all living things were under that. But as more DNA evidence came about, we now have 3 domains of life. Eukarya, right here on the right, is you and me, eukarya. And that's where plants and animals and fungus and all the, a lot of the things that we think about when we think of life are generally eukaryotic, unless we're talking about bacteria. Okay, so if I just look at ribosomes, I just wanted to highlight them because they are one of the organelles. They reflect a common ancestry. Okay, so their presence in all organisms helps us see that, wow, we all have this one basic unit in common. The other reason why it reflects common ancestry is that they all have their own RNA. and it's called rRNA. So the fact that there's a nucleic acid component in this organelle kind of raises everyone's eyebrows like, oh, okay, well, we know that nucleic acids are capable of replication and they hold information, right? Think back to macromolecules, nucleic acid, the order of those bases reflects a language. It's telling us information, and it's just a huge piece of evidence that all these living things have ribosomes. This has some sort of nucleic acid. It's really, really great evidence that helps reflect common ancestry, which basically goes back to that tree where it's being rooted in that center line. Okay, so if we go back real quick to my living things tree, we've got bacteria, archaea, and eukarya. So I'm going to just show you a typical prokaryotic cell. Hold on one second. Someone's got a question. Is the plasma membrane and cell membrane the same thing? Yes. Yes. So a cell membrane is a plasma membrane. Yep. It's a good question, actually. Very good question. Okay. So when we looked at that tree, there was bacteria, archaea, and eukarya. So the bacteria and archaea are both prokaryotic cells. We'll go into what prokaryotic means in a second, but just take a look at it. It's pretty simple. It has some sort of capsule or outside membrane. Sometimes it has a flagella. It has ribosomes, right? That's the number one thing that they all share. They have ribosomes and they have DNA, right? So they've got some sort of membrane, ribosomes, and then DNA. The DNA is not held in the nucleus. It's kind of just free floating. There is no nuclear membrane. So compare that to a typical eukaryotic cell. Okay? Just by looking at it, which one's more complex? Is a eukaryotic cell or a prokaryotic cell more complex? Yeah, absolutely. Good, Sandra. Good, Javier. Yeah. Eukaryotic cell, way more complex, right? Generally belonging to more complex organelle or organisms. Okay, this is an animal cell, just a cartoon picture of an animal cell. It's not a plant cell. We would know it was a plant cell if it had a cell wall and if it had some chloroplasts. So there's going to be certain organelles. I mean, obviously this has a bunch of organelles that we could memorize and maybe go back to like 8th grade science and fill out a diagram and just memorize where all these things are and what they look like. But that's not really the point in AP biology. The point is making decisions on, okay, well, this one cell has 3 mitochondria compared to this one that has 200. Like, what type of cell could that be? Why would one cell have a ton of mitochondria and why would another not? Okay, so start thinking in that type of lens instead of just, I got to memorize these facts and organelles. Start to think more deeply about, well, why does this cell look like this? And what's the purpose? What's the bigger picture of another cell looking a different way? Okay, so here's that plant cell. Like I was just about to kind of mention that the other one was an animal cell. Here's a plant cell. It looks a little bit different. Obviously, it's a cartoon diagram, but there's different things in there. We've got chloroplasts. We have cell walls and all that good stuff. So if we're just looking at plant cells, 3 unique things that set plant cells apart from animals is the presence of chloroplasts, large vacuoles, and a cell wall. Okay, so even though there's a bunch of organelles that we should know, start to think about, okay, well, what's unique about this cell compared to the others? So plant cells have chloroplasts, animal cells will not. Bacteria will not have a chloroplast. We'll get more into chloroplasts later in the week when we talk more structure function. Same thing with cell wall, right? A cell wall is going to help support. And a large vacuole allows, you can see it here in blue, it's like this big blue thing right in the middle. The large vacuole allows for water storage, okay, which is obviously important if you're a plant as well. The nucleoid, it's right in the center of the nucleus. I wouldn't worry too much about the nucleoid itself, but right in here we have your nucleus and your nucleolus. Same thing. It's just where your DNA is concentrated. Okay, so what I want you to think about real quick before we move on, if you were to be given information about root words and the meanings, let's see how you feel about explaining why something is termed the way it is in biology. So using the root word meanings in the chart, explain why the terms prokarya and eukarya appropriately describe prokaryotic and eukaryotic cells. So look at those roots and look at those meanings. Think back to that picture of the bacteria that was very simple. It just had DNA free floating. The other ones were more complex. Okay, so if we look at the third root, good, you guys are on it. So it was before there was a nucleus. Good. So prokaryotic was organisms, it was before there was a nucleus. So they're evolutionarily older, absolutely. Prokarya does not have a nucleus. Eukarya, it's eukaryon, true nucleus. So it means they actually have a nucleus that's protecting the DNA. Where prokaryotic cells do not have that. It really simplifies their cell replication. That's why like a bacterial cell can replicate like crazy. And that's why if you get one little bacteria from someone's sneeze, you're sick in like 24 hours because bacteria can replicate so quickly. Where a more complicated cell, if we go back here, imagine how complicated it is to replicate this identically. If we had just this typical eukaryotic cells, organelles have to be replicated. It needs to get big enough to split in two. DNA needs to be organized. It is a big, fun mess to learn for sure. But in terms of just how complicated it is, way more complicated than a prokaryotic cell. Okay, this one will help. I think you guys will be fine with this one, but we can answer it anyway. A major structural difference between prokaryotic and eukaryotic is A, Golgi apparatus is only found in prokaryotic. B, prokaryotic cells have no nuclear membrane. C, nucleic acids are only found in prokaryotic cells. D, mitochondria are found in greater quantities in eukaryotes. So A, B, C, or D. Good. I figured you guys would be great with this one because you basically just said all that in your last answer. Good. Yay. Yep. Nice job. So B, they've got no nuclear membrane, which means no nucleus. If you don't have a nuclear membrane, you don't have a nucleus. Okay. Good. All right. So I want you to just think for a moment about the jobs that a cell needs to have. So if you're a cell, if you're a bone cell, a muscle cell, a cell within a plant, anything that's a living cell or that is living and has cells, you need some sort of support or structure. You need to make or use macromolecules. So think back, proteins, nucleic acids, carbs, lipids. You need to either make them or use them or both. You need to let things in and out of the cell. You need to get rid of things, right? So get rid of waste. You need to get nutrients, obtain nutrients, and then divide if and when needed. So these are all the jobs that just one cell has. And obviously, if there weren't several types of little, organelles, it would be such a complicated mess, and it would be not very efficient. So there's all these jobs that need to get done. And it's just, I know a lot of teachers use like factories as an example. When you think about a cell, like the cell is a factory and everyone who's got a job in the factory is an organelle, right? So like the person who's in charge of sweeping out the waste is the lysosome, because that's analogous to what a lysosome does. So we'll get to that a little later, but it all goes back to just what is everybody's job and what happens if they don't do their job. Okay, typical bacterial cell, this is just review because I already went over it with you, but it has DNA, ribosomes, cell wall, cell membrane. I drew this. I would encourage you to also just draw stuff. It helps. It just gets it into your head that, okay, like this is it, and just gives you a better picture in your own images. Cell wall or cell or cell membrane. Some have both, but some bacteria just have a cell membrane. So not all of them have cell walls, some of them do. All right, a typical plant cell, again, I drew this. It's nothing super fancy. It's highlighting that you've got your basic stuff, a nucleus, obviously. You've got the chloroplast, like I mentioned before. That's where photosynthesis is happening. It has this large vacuole. I like to think of it like a vacuum, but it's not vacuuming up dirt. It's vacuuming up excess water, and it can expand immensely inside the cell and actually makes the cell nice and rigid, which is what a plant would like. If a vacuole has no water, it shrinks, and then the cell actually shrinks too, which is not good. So if you ever see like a wilted plant or a plant that looks really sad, its vacuoles are probably very empty and it needs to be watered. Okay. So just real quick, we're going to compare plant cells and bacterial cells with this question. So they both have A, ribosomes, B, DNA, nuclear membrane, or D, both A and B, E, both B and C. Oh, phototropism. It's not actually phototropism. That's actually a plant bending toward light. Not bending because it's wilting. It'll just bend toward the light source, but not full on like 360. The plant is drooping. But that's a correct word, phototropism. That is a plant bending. Okay, so plant cells and bacterial cells both have, you just want to give that an answer? A, ribosomes, B, DNA, C, nuclear membrane, D, both A and B, or E, both B and C. So what do plant and bacterial cells both have in common? Good. Yeah, D. A lot of questions tend to compare, prokarya and eukarya together, and then plant and animal together. But a lot of the times, plants and prokarya aren't specifically talked about when they do have a lot in common. They have ribosomes, they have DNA, sometimes cell walls. So good. D is your answer. Absolutely, both A and B. So they both have ribosomes and DNA. If cell walls would have been an option, that would have been correct too, that they also have cell walls. Okay, we'll keep going through this typical plant cell and typical animal cell stuff. I don't want to just spend an entire page talking about each individual organelle because I think that's boring and I don't think that's going to help. So we're just going to kind of keep rolling. All right. First, by talking about the heavy hitters of the plant cell. What is a protist? So a protist is a eukaryotic cell. So something like algae or even kelp. They are eukaryotic, but they are generally single cell organisms. All right, so vacuoles, they're the heavy hitters of plants. Like I said, they store excess water, enzymes, and waste products. The chloroplast is going to be huge when we talk about photosynthesis. It's one of those really key things in AP biology. So tomorrow, hopefully, when the streamer talks about it, we'll go over structure function. Cell wall is all about supporting and protecting the cell. If you are a plant, you tend to grow tall, right? Like unless you're a moss or some sort of low gathering vine, but most plants are growing vertically and they are having to withstand gravity. Okay, gravity's pulling on them, or they're bearing large fruit and the fruit is hanging down. So plant cells have to have that cell wall for that rigidity. Cell walls can be filled with cellulose, right? Remember that carbohydrate? It's going to be those heavy, those linear stack chains of carbohydrates. Cellulose is what helps protect that as well, or strengthen the cell wall. Okay, typical animal cell, heavy hitters here. Oh wait, shoot, here's a concept check. Actually, I'm going to skip that one. We'll skip that question. Let's go to animal cell heavy hitters. We'll go back to that question later. So animal cells have lysosomes. Plants have them too, but we talk about them a lot in animal cells because we have a lot of waste that's generated. There's a lot coming in and a lot going out. And so we need little structures to basically have enzymes. I drew it as pink with like little green dots. And so the little green dots would be enzymes that help break stuff down. And so whether that means we're breaking down old proteins or we're breaking down food, right? So like your digestive cells will have a lot of lysosomes because they're in charge of breaking down a lot of stuff. And so think about that too, where if I were to talk about digestion and, our enzymes not being broken down and there's a buildup of something, or products, sorry, not enzymes not being broken down, but let's say there's a buildup of some sort of macromolecule or a buildup of something that's supposed to be broken down. It's usually the lysosome that should have been doing that job. The endoplasmic reticulum, again, this is in plants too, but in animal cells, tends to be a heavy hitter because we're making lots of protein. We're making lots of lipids compared to the plant cell. So your endoplasmic reticulum is this blue stuff that's kind of connected off to the nucleus. The rough is rough because it has ribosomes on it. So it's got like these dots. That's where proteins are made. The smooth ER has no ribosomes. And so that is where your lipids will be made. So same idea. Think about like, well, if it's a cell that has a lot of smooth ER, what kind of cell could it be? Why would that cell be making lipids or steroids rather than protein, right? Like a muscle cell, for example, if it's making lots and lots of protein, you would expect those cells to have a ton of rough ER. Okay, so like I said, these are just cartoon images, and most things you see in textbook are cartoon images. So just don't assume every cell looks like that, right? Depending on the cell's overall job, it can have really high amounts of certain organelles because of its job. All right, the Golgi complex, that's a big one too. Here I drew it in orange. It's these stacks of membranous sacs. And so that's going to be the one that kind of packages, basically takes care of what the ER didn't finish doing. So the ER will help with making the proteins and lipids, but then your Golgi complex will put chemical tags on each specific protein to help the cell know what to do with it. So if it's something that needs to go out of the cell, it'll tag it a certain way, and then it'll leave in these little orange vesicles and either leave the cell or they'll go right into the cytoplasm for use right away. So packaged proteins. And then mitochondria, which is also, and again, these are all things that are in plants too, but they're just heavy hitters in the animal world or in the eukaryotic world. So mitochondria is where cellular respiration happens. So if you're in that unit already, you're probably like, oh my gosh, I talk about the mitochondria every single day. But again, it's one of those organelles to know very well. Okay, so you know how I mentioned every cell doesn't look like this? The biggest one I think of is an animal cell that has some of the same organelles, but because of its unique function, it doesn't need the whole gamut. So for example, like a sperm cell, right? That's actually a cell that only has half the amount of DNA. Okay, it's got mitochondria like crazy, right? Because mitochondria is where cell respiration happens, and that's where a lot of ATP is made, and the sperm has a really long journey to find an egg. It has a plasma membrane, it has nucleus, all that stuff, but it doesn't need all the other things because it has a very short life. Okay, sperm is made, and a sperm is released in hopes of fertilization. Okay, so that's just I like that example to show how unique every animal cell can look, and they don't all just look like they do on the page. Okay, one more thing to zoom in on. Your teacher might have talked about the endomembrane system, which is basically the system from nucleus out to plasma membrane. Endo meaning within, and membrane meaning all these things have membranes that protect them from the outside surface of even within the cell. And so generally, the idea is we go from DNA information, right? So when we get to transcription and translation, this will be more concrete in your heads. But we have DNA information in the nucleus that gets transcribed into RNA. And that strand comes out and runs through these ribosomes on the rough ER to make a protein. From there, that protein goes into this pink structure, the Golgi apparatus, gets packaged, gets identified as where you need to go. Do you need to leave the cell? In this case, this is leaving the cell in these little particles, and it's called exocytosis. Oh dear. It's called exocytosis, and so that protein is actually leaving the cell because maybe another cell needs it. So this whole system of, from nucleus to rough ER to Golgi apparatus to vesicle out of the cell, that's a nice flowy system and shows that organelles are working together and they all have a job. And without one of them working properly, like if my Golgi apparatus wasn't packaging my proteins right, they would never get to their destination. So everybody plays an important role. Okay, we're almost done here. I'm going to skip that because you guys are going to get into that much more detail tomorrow night, and I don't want to take what she's going to be doing. Last final thing I just want to show you is when we think about cells in a eukaryotic or organelles in a eukaryotic cell, there's 4 main jobs that all the organelles can kind of be fit into. So there's genetic control, manufacturing, distribution, and breakdown. So making stuff, distributing it, or breaking it down. It's kind of like one big thing. Energy processing, and finally, structural support, communication, and movement. So I really like organizing all these jobs into 4 categories, or the organelles into these categories, because I think it just helps solidify how well you know it, and rather than just say like, oh yeah, I know the mitochondria is the powerhouse. Sure, but where does it fit in the big picture? So genetic control, your nucleus and ribosomes contribute to that. The manufacturing, it's all the thing I just talked about with the endomembrane system, this rough and smooth ER, Golgi complex, lysosome, and vacuoles all play a role. Energy processing, mitochondria, and chloroplasts. Good question. So someone asked, are the lysosomes breaking down proteins or other nutrients? They will break down whatever needs to be broken down. So sometimes it's proteins. Sometimes it's even like a macromolecule that they need to break down. So they're supposed to be breaking down sugar, or they're supposed to be breaking down some sort of carbohydrate, and they're supposed to be breaking it down, like maybe into glucose, so that then the mitochondria can use it. But yeah, it's a lot of times things that you're eating, or any byproducts that they need to get rid of. That's a really good question. And then finally, our cell walls, membranes, cell junctions, those are all the things that help, if you think about like the purpose of your bones, right? The fact that it's like holding your entire body up, right? Without it, we would just fall to the ground. That's what the cell walls and cell membranes and cytoskeleton does. So what I encourage you to do, I'm not going to have you do it tonight. On your own though, I would create a function/analogy chart for each organelle. Come up with your own analogy. And maybe this is something you already did in class, but if you did it in class and it didn't really connect and you were like, I don't really know what I'm doing here, try it again on your own and come up with something that almost personifies these organelles. Okay, so for example, if you don't like the factory idea, you could even make it more applicable to something personal in your life, right? So you could call the entire cell the place that you work, right? Or the entire cell could be your sports team, right? Like, oh, this is everyone on my soccer team is the cell, right? Like the team is the cell. Now, who's the nucleus? Who's the one that's got like the information? Who's the one who's kind of in charge of plays or helps the coach? Maybe it is the coach, right? Maybe the coach is the DNA. And come up with a way to explain why that would work in your head. Because if it's working in your head, that means it's sticking there longer. But don't just use those like textbook analogies where you're like, yeah, it's the nucleus is the president, or is the factory person who's in charge or something. So, come up with your own analogy for these. And I think you'll surprise yourself in how much better you feel like you know it if you do that. Okay. Another chart that would be good for you to grab is this one right here. Again, we're not going to go over it tonight because I don't want to step on the other streamers' toes in terms of what they're going to be covering this week. But, grab an organelle and then make a check mark of where you would find it, bacteria, animal, or plant. All right. So if we were to look at this right here, the bacteria won't have many here, right? The bacteria would have ribosomes, and do I even have DNA on here? No, I don't even have DNA. So in this particular chart, I don't even have DNA because it's assumed they all have it, right? So anyway, take a picture of this chart or, download it later from the slides, but I think it'd be really helpful, a good thing, a good tool for you. Okay, and then before we are done, I'm going to give you one practice free response question. Okay, so this would be a short free response example, but the question asks, create a bar graph to predict the relative amounts of the following organelles with these cell types. So we've got a muscle cell, we have a liver cell, and an ovary cell. And I've written the function there for you so you can, yeah, I am a teacher, Shreya. I've written the function there for you for each cell type so you can have an idea of what organelle should be there. So try to just sketch out a bar graph to predict the relative amounts. So the smooth ER, the ribosomes, the mitochondria, and the lysosomes. So I'll give you a second to look at that. All right, so we're looking at 4 different organelles that we're wanting to talk about. If we just think of the muscle cell, we know that its function is movement and heat generation. So which of these organelles should be the highest in a muscle cell comparative to all the other ones? Should the smooth ER be the highest? Ribosomes, mitochondria, lysosome? Liver cell. Okay, so Sandra's talking about the liver cell. So the liver cell, it's detox, breakdown, storage of glycogen. Yes, so I would expect your bar graph for the liver cell to have so many more lysosomes than the other 2. So absolutely, I would say my tallest bar for liver cell would show lysosomes. Mitochondria too, because it would need energy to do all those things, right? So if I'm a liver cell who's in charge of breaking a bunch of stuff down, I need energy to do that. And mitochondria would be a good one to be, maybe not as high as lysosome. I'd put the smooth ER pretty low for the liver cell, and then the ribosomes kind of in the middle. Izzy, absolutely, your mitochondria should be huge for the muscle cell. And ribosomes too, right? Because ribosomes where protein gets made. So I'd have my ribosomes really high for my muscle cell as well. So you guys are getting it. I love it. And then the ovary cell is going to have really high smooth ER, right? Smooth ER is where lipids are made and hormones are lipids. So for the ovary cell, I would want to see really high, a taller bar on your smooth ER. Okay, and then just be able in a free response to explain why and go back to, well, I know the smooth ER is in charge of making lipids, and this is a cell that's making lipids, and so it should have a lot of that organelle in order to do so. Okay, awesome. Izzy's just excited about biology. It's great. I appreciate it. Cool. All right. So that's what I have for you today. Sorry it was a little longer than I thought, but I'm glad you all were here. You had really good questions. I appreciate you participating. Keep coming to these streams. It'll help you kind of stay up to date with what you're doing in AP Bio. Make sure you tell the kids in your class too, especially because the live streams are free. So they don't have to be, plus members, but we'd love to have them. The more the merrier. And the more people we have, the more questions are asked. And then, maybe somebody asks a question that you didn't think about, and then you can learn from their question, which is really, really good. So again, check Twitter to figure out when I'm streaming next, and other AP Bio streamers as well. And have a good night, everyone. Thanks for tuning in so late with me.